Hey everybody, Chris with Malawa Hikes. Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about choosing your campsite, where to put your tent. So let's get into it. First of all, you're going to want to check the regulations for where you're going. They may have special rules about where you can and cannot camp. So check that out before you go. Something that's very common in those kind of regulations is camping 200 feet away from water. So you may be tempted to camp right next to that lake. Don't do that. Camp away from it. We don't want to pollute the water. And yeah, that's one of the things. But you are probably going to want to camp near a water source, a stream, a river, a lake, because it's a lot easier to be able to get water where you're camping. Otherwise, we call that a dry camp, where you have to just bring all the water you need. And that's a little less convenient. So camp near a water source, not just right next to the water source. Now, if you are going to a beautiful lake or a popular area, often there's going to be established campsites. Not necessarily sites that are permit required, but places where other people have obviously camped before. Sometimes there's going to be fire rings there. These places are going to be very obvious in that there's no vegetation, they're flat spots. It's going to be very obvious that there's been tents there before. In those kind of areas, you want to use those established sites. You do not want to go off and make your own thing on vegetation. You want to have as little impact as possible on the environment, on the setting. We don't want to create new sites if there's a place to camp already established. So we're not going to be doing further damage. Having said that, if you're going to camp somewhere there are not obvious sites, you're going to want to look for a place that doesn't have vegetation. Don't camp on wildflowers. The grass in your yard is durable and meant to be walked on. The grass out there is not. So if you absolutely have to camp on grass in the backcountry and you're going to stay more than one night, you're going to want to move your tent to have as little impact as possible on that. But look for a place with sand, dirt, leaves that are fallen and dead. Pine needles are great because those have fallen off, they're dead. So if there's nothing growing there, that's a place you might want to put your tent. Now, when looking for a spot, generally when I get to my destination, I'm going to take off my pack and scout around without my pack on. It's a lot easier to get around, and that's generally the end of your hiking day. You're tired, so drop your pack, throw on camp shoes if you've got them. Look around for the best site, best views, and there's a lot of things you're going to want to look for in a site. Now, one of those things is a flat spot, and that may seem obvious, and it may seem like it'd be easy to find. I found, while hiking the Pacific Crest Trail in Southern Oregon, I thought I could just stop whenever I was tired and find a campsite. And honestly, there was so much brush. The entire trail was on slopes, and there were no spots for miles and miles and miles. So wherever you're going, you're going to want to look for a flat spot, flat as possible, because any slope is going to affect your sleep, and it may be a very gentle slope. And when you walk on it, you might not even notice there's a slope, but when you're sleeping, any slope is going to be very noticeable. And if there is a bit of a slope, you're going to want to camp sleeping with your head on the uphill side. If you sleep with your head down, you'll probably wake up with a headache. If the slope is pronounced at all, you're going to find yourself sliding up against the tent in the middle of the night. So as flat as possible would be preferable. So flat and level. Now you're going to want a site that's big enough for your tent, obviously. And sometimes that's hard if you have a bigger tent. So sometimes you may be up against a tree or rocks and things, but look for a good wide area. And you're going to want to look for something maybe with some shade, especially if you're camping in a site and you're going to spend a few days there and you're out day hiking and coming back. If your tent's in the sun, it's going to be boiling inside when you get back in there. So look for some shade. But under a tree is great, except you want to look up and make sure there are no dead branches that may come down in the wind or just randomly in the middle of the night and kill you. Yeah, people have been killed by huge branches falling down. So we call those widowmakers, and you want to look out for those. I remember the second leg of the Pacific Crest Trail in Oregon. I found a perfect spot. It was really hard to find a spot, and everything I needed was there. And then I looked up and there was a huge dead branch and the wind was picking up. So I had to pick up and move because I didn't want to die. So look for widowmakers, but look for shade. Shade's a good thing. And speaking of things that might come through your tent, if you're camped next to a slope and there's rockfall, you don't want to be too close to that. It would really suck to have a rock come zooming through your tent while you're sleeping. In Mount Whitney, there was an earthquake, and 2 campsites were destroyed by huge falling boulders. So be mindful of the surroundings. There are a few dangers you want to look for. Aside from a flat spot, consider wind. Sometimes the wind doesn't really pick up until after the sun goes down, but you may get an idea of where the wind would be coming from or is coming from, and you can consider finding a spot that's going to give you a little protection from that wind. High winds at night keep you awake and could blow your tent down possibly. I've never had that happen, but definitely have been in big windstorms and it made it hard to sleep. So look for some wind protection. So if you see a beautiful hill and you want a great view up there, just know tops of hills going to have higher winds. Mountain passes absolutely have hideous winds, ridge tops. So down a little bit would be good. Look for some trees just to break that wind a little bit. And a little breeze is good, keeps the mosquitoes away. And when you set up your tent, if there is a lot of wind, consider where the wind is coming from, consider how your tent is built, and try to pitch it in a way that the wind is going to have the least effect. So if you have a long, wide tent, probably don't have the side facing to where the wind comes from. So that'll be a little more pleasant for you. Now, water goes downhill. So consider when you're looking at these sites, is that site the lowest spot around? And if it rains, is all the water going to go down there? Are you going to wake up in a puddle? So look to see where the drainage would go and don't pitch your tent in that lowest spot or else you're going to have a mess. So consider that. Also, valleys, low areas, cold air settles, so it's going to be colder in lower areas as well. So another thing to keep in mind in the big picture, but definitely do not camp somewhere where the water is going to pool or run directly through. So think about that while you're looking for your site so you stay nice and dry. Now, when you find a spot, you are looking for something with no vegetation. Pine needles would be great. A flat spot, no little indentations, no little humps and things that you're going to feel in the middle of the night. And then you want to clear that area a little bit. Look for sticks, look for rocks, especially sharp rocks, big rocks. The tiniest pokey little rocks are going to be super noticeable through your tent floor. Now, you can use a footprint to help protect that if that's something you want to carry out there. I choose not to carry the extra weight, so I'm very mindful when I get to a camp that I am clearing out the area where my tent is going to go. Make sure there's no pine cones, there's no sticks, definitely sharp little rocks. We want to clear all of those out so we don't damage the bottom of our tent, we don't feel it while we're sleeping, and we don't poke a hole in our sleeping pad. Now, if you're going to a popular area, there may already be people there when you get to that place. Be considerate of other people. Don't plop down in that perfect spot if it's right next to somebody that's already camping. You really should be far enough away, hopefully so you can't see each other's tents, but if that's not possible, at least far enough away to where you're not going to be bothering them, they won't be bothering you, and you'll both have a more pleasant experience. So, you know, scout around. Maybe they're right next to a great site, but I'm sure you'll find another site that gives you a little more privacy and solitude, and that's something you should be looking for out there. Now, if you're not going to an established site, let's say you're hiking a through trail and you're just going until you get tired and you stop and look for a site. It's best not to camp right next to the trail. Absolutely do not camp on the trail. Sounds obvious. I've seen some weird stuff out there. But a couple of reasons to get off the trail a little ways. If your tent's right next to the trail, it kind of has an impact on the experience other people are having as they're hiking through. And it's going to have an impact on your experience in that camp because people are going to be hiking right next and right past you and back and forth, and that can be a little irritating. So go off the trail, look for a spot. If you go off the trail far enough that you can't see the trail, it's a good idea to mark it somehow. Maybe put your buff out there or a shirt so you know which direction the trail is. That may sound silly, but after camping overnight, waking up, you may be disoriented, and people have gotten lost. People have gotten lost just getting off the trail to go pee. So it happens. So that's definitely something to think about. So in summary, flat area, preferably already established site, and if not, on the least impactful area, don't camp on vegetation if you can help it. Looking for shade, looking for wind protection. We don't want to be in a low area where the water is going to be, and we want to be far enough away from the water sources to be happy, peaceful, wonderful neighbors. And that was a weird thing to say, but anyway, those are really things you're going to look for. Remember, look up above you. We don't want to have a widowmaker in our camp, and don't camp right next to strangers. Unless they invite you to, and you know, you want to make friends. That's fine, I suppose. So just a few things to think about when you're selecting a site. It's not as easy as just going out there and dropping your tent anywhere. Some of these things are helpful to you. Some of these things are helpful to the environment. And all in all, it's for a better experience for everybody. So thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time.